wisdom, hakma, a feminine verb, a noun, technical term. Not where did wisdom originate. We know that wisdom was common in the ancient Near East. But when did wisdom become prominent in Israel as a movement? When did the wisdom movement become prominent within Israel? Who remembers? Let's review. It's very quiet here now. What three kings do we have wisdom described in relation to? Everybody's going to think of Solomon. What about David? Was David a particularly wise king? Well, wisdom is ascribed to David, especially in his later reign, 2 Samuel 14. We read this story before about the wise woman from Tekoa. We didn't read the last paragraph, however. 2 Samuel 14:18. The king answered the woman, "Do not hide from me anything I ask you." And the woman said, "Let my lord the king speak." The king said, "Is the hand of Joab with you in all this?" See, David figured out what was going on. The woman answered, "As surely as you live, my lord the king, one cannot turn to the right hand or the left from anything that my lord the king has said. It was your servant Joab who bade me. It was he who put all these words in the mouth of your handmaid. In order to change the course of affairs, your servant Joab did this. But my lord has wisdom, like the wisdom of the angel of God, to know all the things that are on the earth." The wise woman of Tekoa ascribes what? A particular or unusual wisdom to King David. This is not the only place where in the narratives, in the later reign of David, he is described as a wise king, having unusual wisdom. Now, of course, what happens next? Well, the wise king par excellence, who is the model of wisdom, is which king? Well, Solomon. Now, I need to tell you that there is disagreement among the Bible writers about Solomon and his wisdom. Okay? The historian who put together the final copies of the book of Samuel and the book of Kings did not think that Solomon was very wise. Why? What did Solomon do according to him? Well, it was those wives. It was those wives and making palaces and temples for their national gods that caused the schism, according to the historian, between Israel and Judah. Right? But the chronicler says no such thing. If you read the book of Chronicles, how did the schism come about? There's no mention of wives, there's no mention of temples, there's no mention of foreign gods, there's no mention of idolatry, there's only mention of wisdom. And it was Solomon's son's lack of wisdom that caused the schism. In other words, if you read Chronicles by itself, you would never hear of anything bad about Solomon. There's no mention of any kind of failure on Solomon's part at all. In fact, if you read Chronicles, Solomon is the ideal king. That is the king who is like the Messiah of the future. Yes. And Solomon's great act of wisdom was in building the temple. in the chronicler. Okay? And when the chronicler wrote his story, he was trying to get people to rebuild the temple. And he was saying that Solomon's building the temple was the symbol of his wisdom. Interestingly. Yes.
Give some credit to David. He was the one that wanted, and he collected almost all the material.
Yes. Now that's again how Kings and Chronicles differ. We know from the numbers, the reign numbers in the book of Kings, how long each king's reign was in relation to the kings of Israel, that according to the historian who put together the book of Kings, King David wasn't dying when Solomon was made king. He was merely old. And in fact, Solomon was made king while David was still alive. Solomon was very young. He was still a teenager, but he was made king. And how long was the co-regency which set the pattern for Judah? Each of the kings of Judah reigned, well, except for one whose father was murdered. Each of the kings reigned with their father before the father died, and then reigned with the son before they died. There were 20 kings on the throne of David after Solomon, and they had co-regencies. They reigned together. We now know from looking carefully at the numbers in Kings that David and Solomon reigned together. Okay? And it was during this period of co-regency where the one says Solomon did it, the other says David did it. And in fact, which is correct? Well, they're both correct, because it was during the co-regency. And how long was the co-regency? 7 years. For 7 years, David and Solomon were both king over the united monarchy. Okay? And it was during that 7-year period that the gathering of the materials and workmen for the temple was going on. Yes. Now, it was during this period also that wisdom as a movement was being pushed, shall we say, at the royal court. What country in the ancient world had developed wisdom literature most explicitly and in greatest detail? What country influenced Judah and Israel in this wisdom literature movement? Yes. Egypt was the country par excellence for wisdom and wisdom literature. Remember I told you that there are over 2,000 separate wisdom treatises surviving from ancient Egypt? Yes, it's amazing. Many of them contemporary to the wisdom literature of the Bible, and one section of the book of Proverbs identical word for word, to one of the wisdom books from Egypt. Yes. Now there are 3 kinds of wisdom in the book of Proverbs. There is the wisdom that one can recognize that is parallel to wisdom statements from the ancient world. In other words, you can find a proverb in the book of Proverbs that you can also find word for word in Egypt and in Mesopotamia. It's the same words, exactly. Okay? Then there is the wisdom literature in the stories that are unique to the Old Testament. We read Daniel, Joseph. We're just reading this story about the wise woman of Tekoa. These, of course, are wisdom stories that have to do with the history of Israel and Judah and would not be found anywhere else in any other ancient literature. And then there are the so-called Yahwist proverbs. These have to do with the religion of the Hebrews and are distinctly different from the wisdom literature found anywhere else in the ancient world. One of the things that's most interesting is that the purpose of wisdom in Egypt was to make the gods complacent and to make society stable. Now there's a lot about the stability of society in Proverbs. But the stability of society and making sure that the gods are complacent isn't a moral activity, is it? Is it? It's not particularly moral, just to make sure that society is stable, right? So, in those proverbs that have to do with the Yahwist religion, the religion of the Hebrews, one of the things that you notice immediately is morality. Moral and ethical concerns that were absent in Egypt. Because, of course, in Egypt, there wasn't morality in the Old Testament sense at all. There was no such thing as righteousness. They had a word for holy. We talked about this last week when we were talking about Leviticus. They had a word for holy or righteous, but what did it mean? It didn't mean morally good. What did it mean? Yeah. If we said that the god, what's Ta? Egypt is the house of Ta. If we said the god Ta was holy, what did we mean? We meant merely that he was powerful, awesome, and could kill us. Therefore what? We had to act reverential because what? Because of his power. That's not morality. That's something different. Okay? All right. Now then, are there other wisdom stories that you can think? Oh, 2 Samuel 20, just over right here. Do you remember this story? Let's begin. This is one of the revolts. Verse 1. Now there happened to be there a worthless fellow, whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjaminite. And he blew the trumpet and said, We have no portion in David, and we have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tents, O Israel. So all the men of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba the son of Bichri. But the men of Judah followed their king steadfastly from the Jordan to Jerusalem. David came to his house at Jerusalem and so forth. And this man, Sheba, who had raised a new rebellion, withdrew. And Joab and David's army were chasing him. Verse 14 says, And Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Beth-maacah, and all the Bichrites assembled and followed him in. And all the men who were with Joab came and besieged him in Abel of Beth-maacah. They cast up a mound against the city, and it stood against the rampart, and they were battering the wall to throw it down. Now this didn't all happen in a day or an hour. This, when you besiege a city and you build a rampart, and you finally are to the point where you're battering the gate down, how long did this take? Many sieges are known to have lasted a year, 2 years. In the case of Samaria, how long did the siege last? 3 full years, yes. All right, now, this is the end of this long process, and the city's going to fall. They were battering the wall to throw it down. Then a wise woman called from the city, Here, tell Joab, come here, that I may speak to you. And he came near her, and the woman said, Are you Joab? He answered, I am. Then she said to him, Listen to the words of your maidservant. He answered, I am listening. Then she said, They were wont to say in old time, Let them but ask counsel at Abel, and so they settled the matter. I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city which is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the inheritance of Yahweh? Joab answered, Far be it from me, far be it, that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not true. But a man of the hill country of Ephraim called Sheba the son of Bichri has lifted up his hand against King David. Give him up alone, and I will withdraw from the city. The woman said to Joab, Behold, his head shall be thrown to you over the wall. Then the woman went to all the people in her wisdom, and they cut off the head of Sheba the son of Bichri and threw it out to Joab. So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city, every man to his home, and Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. What? You shake your head? we've noticed a number of stories by now where the wisdom teacher is what? Each city seems to have what? Yes. Okay. Yes. Each city seems to have a wisdom teacher who is what? A woman. A wise woman. Many have theorized that originally, and this was true in Egypt too, originally the wisdom movement was a teaching movement, and the original wisdom teachers were women. Is there any indication of this in the book of Proverbs? Well, we mentioned the virtuous wife in... Oh, we missed... Is there any indication of this in the book of Proverbs? Well, it ends with the virtuous woman, who is the symbol of the wisdom teacher. The wisdom teachers of the various cities. Now, by the way, let's get it straight so we're not confused. What was a city? I said the various cities had wisdom teachers. What was a city? A great distinction is made in Leviticus between the cities and the villages. That's it. Did you hear what he said? Walls. If a place was big enough to be a walled city with gates and so forth, that was a district center. And each village was counted as belonging to a particular city. They even constructed genealogies where the city was called the father and the villages the sons, or sometimes the city was called the mother and the villages were called the daughters. Genealogies, right? So that's why we have to be careful about genealogies. Now, just a word about this. How did particular sites become cities anyway, and other places just not become cities? What determined how they happened to place their cities? Jerusalem has a sheer drop on 3 sides. So that was obviously one thing. Samaria drops off on all sides with hills surrounding it. What's the most obvious thing? Defensible was number 2. What was number 1? Water. Where you got water from a spring or you could dig for it, like in Hazor where they dug down 1,000 feet. If you got water at a site that's defensible, you got a city. So when a city was destroyed, what did they do?
Poison the wall.
Yeah. However, later on, what would happen? Defensible site with water, what would naturally happen? They'd build it back again in that same site. And that's how the tell developed. What's the tell? Hebrew word, Arabic word, Semitic word that means what? Mound, hill. At Hazor, 21 cities, separate cities, destroyed and built again, one on top of another. Oh, there were some wise women at Hazor. Judges 4. What were the women doing in Hazor? How did this war come about? This is very interesting. This war between Israel and the Canaanites at Hazor was both sides of the war were ordered by women. it happens that one of the chief Canaanite deities at this great North Canaanite city was a woman. And one of the symbols of the wise woman who got her wisdom from this deity, Astarte, was the woman looking out the window. And guess what the archaeologists have found? Many plaques. If you want to see one, you could go over to the library and look in the book Ancient Near Eastern Pictures, and you'll see a picture of a plaque of the wise women of Hazor looking out through the lattice work of the window. It's mentioned right in the Song of Deborah. Okay? And the Song of Deborah itself is a typical example of a wisdom poem by a woman. Now you remember what happened to the general of the army there. He fled from his chariots. He ran after the Canaanite army was defeated. And where did he run? He went where? Whose tent? Now, we know from genealogies, because we were studying this back in Exodus, that this Heber the Kenite was a descendant of Moses. This was part of Moses' family, and Jael, which just means Yahweh is God, Yael, right? The name means Yahweh is God. It's a Hebrew name. He came there to her abode, which was not an ordinary abode, was it? No, it mentions the word. It was a temenos. It was a holy place. It was a shrine. Heber the Kenite was a priest. Okay? It was a sanctuary. That's why he fled there. It was a sanctuary. When you say to give somebody sanctuary, what does that mean? To this very day, it means what? Yeah. And so he fled there for sanctuary. And what did she do? Well, she drove the tent peg through his skull. And that was part of a sanctuary story. And then in the story of the Song of Deborah, the women are looking out. The women who had counseled this war are looking out, and they're waiting for the army to come back. And what are they asking? Why so long? Why so long? All right, on this theme of the wisdom teachers as women, I want to ask, what kinds of things do we see in Proverbs that illustrate that? Well, we said there was Proverbs 31. What's that? Well, we sometimes say the good wife, but it's not really about just the woman as a wife. That's to miss the point. What else? Are you all familiar with this passage? It's one of the most famous passages in the book of Proverbs. Are you all familiar with it? And it's in this section. Chapter 31 begins this way. The words of Lemuel the oracle, which his mother taught him. And this is an interesting transition of the wisdom teachers from women to men. The wisdom teachers were originally women. In the later Old Testament, as we're going to see when we study the prophets, the wisdom teachers were men. How did the difference occur? Well, it occurred, what? Why did it occur? Okay. Right here is an example in a section that's attributed to Lemuel the oracle. If he is an oracle, he is a what? No, he's a wisdom teacher. And where did he get his wisdom from? his mother. As with many other kinds of professional guilds, I said before that wisdom was taught for money. You paid tuition to find out what was in the book of Proverbs. They taught crafts, and they taught examples in daily life of wisdom. This is what's left of the school system of Israel. Crafts and guilds were passed down how? You didn't enter a guild because you said, let me see, what shall I go into? I think I'm going to take up metallurgy. I think I'm going to become a metal worker. That pays good. You didn't do that in Israel. Why? How did you get to be a metal worker? Yes. Do you remember the Rechabites in Jeremiah's day? Remember the story of the Rechabites? They are said to be wise. Jeremiah commends them for their wisdom. Now, wisdom means skill. The actual word, mark this carefully now, the actual word in Hebrew means skill. A wise person is a person who's skilled at living. And it originally described the skill of an artisan. Aholiab, who made the sanctuary, was said to be a wise man. That is, a skilled man. All right?
Of the wise man, it says, the wise man called the star.
Yes. Exact. Late wisdom. This type that Daniel was a wise man at the Oriental court. They were the counselors to the Persian emperor. But the wise men in the East also used astrology and the study of animal livers as a way of determining what you should do at any given moment. That's one of the things that's most interesting about Proverbs. There's not one word about a liver, and there's not one word about stars in Proverbs. That wasn't a way to wisdom. That was forbidden in Israel as a way to wisdom. But interestingly, the wise men from the East, who were king's counselors, that's what it meant. The same word is applied to them that was applied to Daniel. The Persian Empire revived in the last couple of centuries before Christ, and it was called the Parthian Empire. It was a remodeling of the old Persian Empire, and this Parthian emperor was fighting against the Romans. And Judea was the country right between the Parthian and the Roman Empire. So it was a very sensitive spot. So when these counselors to the king saw this star over Judea in the west, they told the king. He obviously thought that was very important and told him to go. Yes. That's probably the last mention of wisdom teachers that we have. Now, getting back to the wise men as counselors and craftsmen, I mentioned the Rechabites as a good example of how you entered a guild. And I'm comparing that guild to the guild of the wise teachers. Remember what the Rechabites wouldn't do in Jeremiah's day? Are you all familiar with this story? The Babylonians were besieging the city. The Rechabites who had come into the city. Jeremiah said, come over here. I want you folks to drink some wine. And what? And what? Yeah. They wouldn't drink any wine because their ancestor had forbidden them ever to drink wine. Do you by any chance remember what the verb rekav means or what a merkabah is? It's a chariot. Rekav means to drive a chariot. What were the Rechabites? No, chariot makers. And why didn't they drink wine? For a very practical reason. No chariot maker in Israel could ever drink. It was forbidden, and on pain of death. No member of the guild that made chariots in Israel could ever drink. Why? Because of that famous old World War II saying, what? What? Loose lips sink ships. They knew secrets of metallurgy that only their guild knew. That was their wisdom. I'm trying to get you to see what wisdom was in ancient Israel. The wisdom of the Rechabites was the secrets that they had on how you cast alloys that are strong. They knew how to make steel and not iron that didn't break. And that was their wisdom. And to keep that wisdom, what? They were never to drink, because it was understood. When people get drunk, what do? Yes. Yes. Okay? So there's an example of a guild that passes its wisdom down through the generations. You're born into it. Lemuel the oracle was a wise man. Where did he get his wisdom teachings from? From his mother, of course. Why? Because his mother was what? His mother was what? She was a teacher. She was a wisdom teacher, and she taught her son, and what? He became a famous wisdom teacher. All right? Are there other passages in the book of Proverbs that indicate the woman wisdom teacher?
Proverbs 4 speaks of wisdom and covenant.
Proverbs 4, you say? Let's look at that. Where do you see that?
Starting with verse 5.
4:5. Do not forget, do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Get wisdom, get insight. Do not forsake her. She will keep you. Love her. She will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this. Get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. Prize her highly, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a fair garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. Yes? So how is wisdom pictured here? Wisdom is what? Personified as a woman. Yes. Is there any other place in Proverbs where wisdom seems to be a woman? How about 7:4? Proverbs 7 and verse 4. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call her your intimate friend, to preserve you from the loose woman, from the adventuress with her smooth words. For at the window of my house I have looked out through my lattice, and I have seen among the simple, I have perceived among the youths, a young man without sense, passing along the street near her corner, taking the road to her house, in the twilight, in the evening, at the time of night and darkness. And lo, a woman meets him, dressed as a harlot, wily of heart. She is loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home. Now in the street, now in the market, and at every corner she lies in wait. Okay, now what's happening here? What's the comparison here?
Both wisdom and folly are portrayed as female.
Yes. Here's that image that I told you about at Hazor. The wise woman is the one standing at her window doing what? Looking out, watching, seeing the passing and discerning the passing, understanding what's going on with the passing crowd. She can see their characters. But folly is what? To be a fool in Proverbs is to follow who? Who are you following in Proverbs when you're a fool? A fool is a technical term. It's a term for a person that doesn't have skill or insight or wisdom in how to live. What is folly in the book of Proverbs? If wisdom is a woman, is the great woman, right? The great wisdom teacher, then what is folly? The great prostitute. Yes. And yeah?
Is this why the apostate church is compared as a harlot?
Oh yes. The true church being the pure woman, and the whole idea of the virgin Israel that the prophets use so much, it got from the wisdom movement. The whole idea of picturing, who does this? Isaiah, Hosea, Micah, Jeremiah, which became so much part of the Bible that it's used in the New Testament just automatically. That came from the wisdom movement. The pure woman is the Old Testament wisdom teacher. Yes. And the corrupt church, remember Revelation 17, the harlot? That's the Old Testament picture of folly personified. Okay, let's see what was happening here. So now she seizes him and kisses him, and with impudent face says to him, I had to offer sacrifices. Today I paid my vows. So now I've come out to meet you, to seek you eagerly, and have found you. And that's interesting. This woman has paid her sacrifices. But she's impudent, she's loud, she's wayward. She does the outward forearms, but she's not wise. And what's the problem of the young man? The problem of the young man in this chapter is that he can't discern between the two. Okay? And this leads us to the most famous passage of all, which is Proverbs 8. All right? We can only just begin to look at Proverbs 8 today, but I want to. Proverbs chapter 8. This is a very famous passage, and it's really sort of the center of the first section of Proverbs. Okay? The first 9 chapters of Proverbs are a unit. And when we come to Proverbs 8, we're coming to the summation of that whole first section. Let's read Proverbs 8. Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights, beside the road, in the paths, she takes her stand. Beside the gates, in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals, she cries aloud. To you, O men, I call, and my cry is to the sons of men. O simple ones, learn prudence. O foolish men, pay attention. Hear, for I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than fine gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell in discretion. I find knowledge and prudence. The fear of Yahweh is hatred of evil. Pride, arrogance, and the way of evil, and perverted speech I hate. I have counsel, and I have sound understanding. I have insight. I have strength. By me kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By me princes rule, and nobles govern the earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and prosperity. My food is better than gold, even the finest gold, and my yield than choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, in the paths of justice, endowing with wealth those who love me, and filling their treasuries. Yahweh created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first, for the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth, before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. Where he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew the circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above and established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limits so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master workman. I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in the inhabited world, and delighting the sons of men. So now, my sons, listen to me. Happy are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Happy is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, watching beside my doors. For he who finds me finds life, and obtains favor from Yahweh. But he who misses me injures himself. All who hate me love death. In this poem, which is preparatory to the final poem about wisdom building her temple, and wisdom building her house is what we'll look at next week. In this poem, how is wisdom pictured? This is considered one of the most dramatic and shocking parts of the Old Testament. This chapter has called forth entire books, endless commentary. It's still widely discussed among Old Testament scholars. How is wisdom pictured here?
The first of God's creation, it seems like.
The first of God's creation? Even more so, how are the rest of things created? With the aid of? Not the aid of, what? Through, by means of. By me. And then all the great wisdom, the great creation poetry from the earlier Old Testament is what? Is summarized and put in the hands of wisdom. God, divine wisdom is the means of God's creation. Why does nature work, according to the wisdom teachers? Why does it work? Why does the cycle work? Because God endowed nature with a divine wisdom, which was the first thing he created. This is the theology of creation as taught by the wisdom teachers. It's not exactly the same as Genesis 1. Here, things work. The natural order works. It doesn't dissolve into chaos. Why? In it, God has infused what? Divine wisdom. And that wisdom keeps it alive. Now, what the wisdom teachers are saying is that the universe has a moral order, that it was designed morally to keep you alive. And if you disobey that moral order, that's what the point of the last line is. If you are sinful, if you do the imprudent thing, and this week's lesson was about sexual lust and so forth, that is viewed by the wisdom teachers as folly. That's the harlot. Okay? If you do that, you're going against nature. And what will be the result according to the wisdom teachers? It will kill you. Okay? So, why is the wages of sin death according to the wisdom movement?
Was that the sin?
Yeah, but why?
Natural result.
Yes. That's interesting, isn't it? For the wisdom teachers, it had to do with nature, the nature of things, the natural order. You can't be sinful and stay alive. Nature won't support life. That's what it means about the land vomited out its inhabitants in Leviticus 26. The idea, what?
Even back in Genesis, God didn't say, if you eat of this tree, I will kill you. He didn't
Yes.
say that. He didn't say, I'm going to take an action because you have sinned. He said, because you do this, the result will be. It's the same thing.
Yes, it is. But you know, it's so often the case that people come with the idea that the wages of sin is death because it's a penalty that God imposed. People do have that idea, that the wages of sin is death because God decided to impose a penalty.
This does not necessarily mean that everybody that dies is sinful. Is it right?
Yeah, it does mean that, because according to the wisdom teachers, how many men are fools? All. Yes. Well, then the next question comes, you've raised an interesting issue, then what is the way to life? That's, how do we find life if all men are by nature fools and are by nature in contradistinction to what God created, then how does one find life? Oh, that's discussed in the next chapter. You wouldn't expect this section of Proverbs to end without discussing that. Yes, did somebody want to say something? So in the natural order of creation, the first thing God made was his divine wisdom, which he infused into the natural order. And what then is the goal of the wisdom teacher? It's to get the students back to a proper understanding of what the order of creation was in the first place. All right? Yes?
The tree of life, they were allowed to take that after they had eaten tree of knowledge. If they had eaten the tree of life, what would have happened?
The tree of life was a symbol that God endowed the tree with symbolic qualities of his own life. That's why he wouldn't let them touch it. There was nothing intrinsically powerful in it that would have intrinsically kept them alive. Well, now we're really moving along here. Thank you very much for your attention.